Hey everybody, this is the disembodied head known as Blake here, and welcome to my review of Taken 3, or should I call it Take3n? I hate it when movies have titles like that. It's just so tacky. It's about as tacky as the word tacky. But I digress. I had reasonably high expectations for Taken 3 at first. But as the reviews started coming in, I realized that if I didn't want to be pissed off, I better scale down my hopes. And, be grateful if I get something that's just better than Taken 2. That is all I asked for. And the reason why I had some hopes, though, was because it seemed like Taken 3 had learned from the mistakes of Taken 2. But before I get into that, let me just, jump back to the original Taken, which I think is a pretty solid action thriller, but I also believe it's very overrated. And I put a lot of thought as to why people, general audiences have, reacted so strongly to it, and I believe it comes down to when it was released. Back in 2008, I believe it was. We were not used to seeing Liam Neeson in, starring roles, especially as the action hero. Generally, he'd play the mentor during that time period, but he totally sold us on it. He was awesome, and the entire narrative of Taken built itself around the awesomeness of Liam Neeson. So it worked. The problem is that back then, seeing Liam Neeson play that kind of character was still pretty new and unique. Well, since Taken was such a big success, Liam Neeson has gone to star in many other films where he plays similar roles. And not only are these films usually superior on a technical level or on a storytelling level, they also gave Liam Neeson more to do as an actor. In retrospect, the character of Brian Mills, Liam Neeson's character from Taken, is kind of flat and boring. He's a badass who loves his family. That is the extent of his characterization. So compared to, let's say, A Walk Among the Tombstones, The Grey, even Unstoppable, where Liam Neeson also got to, bring back the highlights of his character from Taken while also, expanding on it much more. It just makes Taken seem kind of obsolete as of 2014. Actually, this kind of rang true as of 2012 when Taken 2 first came out. But when Taken 2 first came out, that pretty much confirmed the problem that I had with Taken, except this time it was a lot worse. Taken 2 is bad, but not in a really inept jump at you kind of way. It's more just really, really dull and mediocre. Nothing about it stands out outside of the fact that it doesn't stand out. Taken 2 is so forgettable that you will forget that you're watching it while you were actually watching it. They didn't do anything new with the character. The formula was almost identical, except it's like the filmmakers had forgotten what made the first film so appealing to begin with. So, by trying to do more with the daughter, it just totally made things, fall apart. We just want to see Liam Neeson as the sole focus. So having him be the one, taken, captured for, a while in that movie, just kind of threw things off and made it difficult to swallow. But when I saw the trailer for Taken 3, it looked like they were going out of their way to change the formula, to, put him in a much different kind of situation, and, maybe give the character a little bit of room to, to show a different side that we haven't seen before. So I thought there was a lot of potential there. Unfortunately, the trailers lied. Taken 3 is pretty much just another rehash of Taken and Taken 2. It just did a pretty solid job at presenting itself in a way that makes you think that you're watching something different. But even if it wasn't, they pretty much just lifted the plot from The Fugitive, so it's not like this would have been original to begin with. But when you look at the actual content, okay, yes, nobody really gets taken, or if they do, that's not the crux of the story. Well, unless you count, his ex-wife Lenore being taken from him when she is killed, but that seems kind of like a stretch. So the story follows Brian Mills, played by Liam Neeson, as he struggles to connect with his daughter, just like in Taken 2, albeit for different reasons. But his life is turned upside down when his wife is brutally murdered, and he is framed for it. So this means that he is being chased by the police, not totally unlike what happens in Taken 1, where he is being pursued by the local law enforcement, while he hunts down the villains, and he finds the villains by capturing one, interrogating the shit out of them, and then learning where he has to go next in order to kick more ass. And then, much like Taken 2, they always have to have those same verbal and visual illusions that I really don't care for. One of the things I thought that was kind of dumb about Taken 2 is how it has the exact same style of narrative, but they try like switching the character's placement within it. So in Taken 2, Liam Neeson was the one who was taken, and his daughter actually has to rescue him. That's not the entire movie, but that is a pretty significant portion of it. I don't think that's anywhere near as clever as the filmmakers do, because we do not want to see Liam Neeson in that role, but whatever. In this case, they actually put him in the shoes of the abductor, even though they don't go very far with that. But like the key scene is when, Forrest Whitaker is saying, I will find you, just like Liam Neeson said in the first movie, and then Liam Neeson responds with good luck, just like the guy who he was chasing says in the first movie. I don't know why they'd bother with that, because once again, they don't go very far with it, and the trailers really expand upon that to the point where you're a little disappointed that they cut out a lot of the scene. So let's get to the big question, because we know that Taken 3 is not going to be as good as Taken 1. But is it as good as Taken 2? That's really difficult to say. I'd just say that they're both in the same league. I think the bad parts of Taken 3 jump out at you more than the bad parts of Taken 2, but the good parts of Taken 3 also stand out a little bit more than the good parts of Taken 2. Taken 2, as I said, was just very mediocre. That film did not leave an impression on me at all, whereas Taken 3 does have claws that leave their mark on you, somewhat, but that just makes it a little bit more disappointing, because I do see what could have been a good movie in this otherwise bad movie. It does have a little bit of inspiration within the screenplay. The problem is that the writer, they just lacked focus. So, for example, you have the cop played by Forrest Whitaker, and I actually liked this character. I liked how eccentric he is, and I think Forrest Whitaker has a lot of fun with the role, and he's really good. In a lot of ways, he's like reprising his role from The Last Stand with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but he has these little quirks about him that really do make him stand out a lot more than he otherwise would have. The problem is that this character who gets so much screen time dedicated to him, who has such a strong opening chapter with this movie, by establishing him as Liam Neeson's equal in terms of his intellect, and the only reason he seems always to be a step behind is because his subordinates aren't as clever as he is. But in the long run, he wasn't really necessary. They spend so much time building him up only for him to barely play a role during the final act. Okay, I think his main contribution is one piece of information that was already kind of superfluous, but anybody could have said that. They didn't need this character to exist exclusively to reveal a motive for one of the villains. So that just seemed like a totally wasted idea. I am totally for a Taken sequel where Liam Neeson, clashes wits with someone who is his equal, maybe even his superior, and I also like the idea of maybe them working together, because you do expect that to happen eventually, because at first he's going to it's just like The Fugitive. But it's just the way it goes about, by the second half of the film, it's obvious they don't really know what to do with the character. So it just seems like a thoroughly wasted idea. The daughter is pregnant. I don't know why that added anything, because, ideally we would care about her safety just because, we cared about it in the previous two films. But they just, for whatever reason, choose to make her pregnant, and maybe that's supposed to add to the suspense. They only sporadically bring that up. When we're first introduced to her, she's taking the pregnancy test, and that affects her first interaction with her father, and then she tells him around the halfway point, and it's a pretty amusing reaction from Liam Neeson, but like, once again, what did that add? And then of course it goes, it appears at the end when she makes her decision what to do with that. Taken 2 may have not have been a good movie, but at least that film went full circle in terms of its character arc, which was, Liam Neeson had become kind of the overprotective father and, was kind of a jerk to her boyfriend, and then at the very end of the movie they had that corny ass scene where he makes peace with him and accepts him, and that at least is a character arc, as flimsy as it is. I don't know what they were going for with this pregnancy subplot, because the daughter doesn't bring it up enough. You never feel that that's affecting any of her decisions. If it just, they throw that in there for absolutely no reason to pad out the already long running time. Oh yeah, I thought the Russian villain was cool in theory because they really build him up as, a badass, a more villainous variation of Brian Mills. But he's just not in the movie enough to really matter. You'd think that this guy who killed Lenore, one of the most important characters from the previous movies, would be thoroughly detestable, that you can't wait to see Liam Neeson finally get his hands on him, but he only really shows up in the beginning and in the end. So why are we supposed... It's like the film can never really build upon that momentum. Can never capitalize on making us really hate that character. He's just a small part of a bigger story. So once again, another wasted idea. One story thread that I did think was pretty compelling, once again at first, was the whole bit with Lenore's husband, Stuart. He was in the first movie, but they recasted him in this one. And a major story thread is you don't know if he's going to be the villain or not. At first, he's acting awfully suspicious, and you're like, well, obviously he's going to turn out to be the bad guy, and the film knows it's being obvious, but then they kind of backtrack a bit, and I thought that was pretty well done. So, at first, when the wife is murdered, he's really throwing Liam Neeson under the bus. He's describing him as kind of an obsessive ex who really wanted to pursue a relationship with her, which wasn't really true, and was harassing her. So you're figuring, okay, well, he's obviously responsible for framing him, but then he ends up actually telling the cop that he doesn't believe Liam Neeson was the killer, but that maybe, somebody, one of his enemies was the one who murdered Lenore. And that makes me wonder, maybe there is an alternate reason. Maybe he isn't the bad guy. And I liked that, but unfortunately, where they ultimately go with it, I just didn't agree with it. It made his decisions in certain scenes not make a lot of sense. So I won't spoil where they go, but I didn't like where it ended up. So once again, it was another half-baked idea that solid first chapter, but it ultimately runs out of momentum. And I think one of the main problems with Taken 3 is that it has all these interesting ideas, and they just don't work well together. They could have made 2 Taken sequels out of these various ideas, but and they could have been good if they spent time actually exploring them, but because there isn't enough time to really do a lot with these various subplots, they just end up feeling very unsatisfying. there isn't any suspense in this movie, even when characters die. And Lenore isn't necessarily the only person who dies. Another important character dies. But when that happens, I was surprised at how detached I was. It's like, oh, well, that person's dead. There wasn't really any build-up. There was no sense of weight to it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they actually just brought that character back in Taken 4 because maybe they were going for a little bit of ambiguity, but it brought no emotions out of me, and I liked that character too, so that was kind of weird. So it's real bizarre when your movie feels incredibly safe when it is willing to kill off its characters. I don't know how you screw that up. It was pretty slow paced. I did occasionally get bored, and if it wasn't, like all these wasted story threads compiling upon each other, it was the various aerial shots. Now, they were pretty good aerial shots, but it's like every scene has to open with them, and it just eventually starts to feel like padding, like it's filler. And that just really slowed down the already encumbered pacing. What about the action? Because Taken 3 is a film that's going to rely a lot on the action. Well, if you thought the action sequences from Taken 2 were exciting, then you should like what you get here. The camera work is just too shaky, the editing is too tight. It's obvious they're trying to tone the violence down in order to keep that rating more marketable at PG-13. I don't remember if Taken was rated R or not. It may have been PG-13 too, but it just seemed to have a certain edge to it, so where, some scenes really do hurt. They make you uncomfortable they make you uncomfortable to watch, but in a good way. Whereas with Taken 3, it's just all standard, shootout and hand-to-hand fights. The choreography is fine, but it's just, once again, it's like the director is going out of their way to obscure the violence, and that just totally kills the flow of the action sequences. And the CGI really, really sucked. And one thing I think that's bizarre about Taken 3 is, even though it does have a little bit bigger of a budget than Taken 2 did, they paid Liam Neeson a lot more money, so they have less funds to do anything else in terms of the action sequences. And they end up resorting to some CGI, and the CGI was pretty bad. Like, that jumped out at me, especially during that big car chase sequence. And then it also leaves you wondering, did anybody die in this? Did Liam Neeson just inadvertently kill all these innocent civilians? Because that seemed like a lot of destruction. But as soon as you start thinking about that, then it's like that's when the bad CGI comes into play, so that maybe that was the plan, to distract you from the I don't even want to say moral ambiguity of the character. If he allowed all these people to die, then that makes Liam Neeson sort of a cold-blooded bastard, which could be an interesting idea in itself, but once again, they never go back to it, so it just seems like another wasted opportunity. God, what else do I want to say? Oh yeah, Liam Neeson's character is just too invincible. He's not a big guy, and he's getting up there in terms of his age, but it's strange seeing him, exchange blows with much younger, bigger people, and it just seems like he's supposed to be physically stronger. So, when he punches somebody, his punches look like they're harder than their punches, and, when they take a hit, they go down, but when he takes a hit, he takes it like a man. The ending is the only real exception, and I liked that, but I think they should really be focusing on how resourceful this character is. Believe it or not, November Man, and I'm probably the only person who remembers November Man, that movie did that well, where Pierce Brosnan, yeah, he's not going to be able to take on most of these people and direct fight scenes, but he knows where to hit. If that requires him doing some cheap shots or, using his surroundings to his advantage, that's how he overcomes his enemies. But Liam Neeson just seemed too strong. They'd have a bit where he does a stunt where he jumps out of a window, lands on a trash can, and he kind of limps away, but then the next scene he's perfectly fine. So that just, I think, contributed to the lack of suspense. I never felt like this character was in any danger. But it is watchable. Primarily thanks to the cast. Everybody has a lot of fun with their roles, and they've made their characters more interesting than they would have been otherwise. So, like, at first I was thinking how absurd it was for them to recast Stewart from kind of just this old normal looking guy to a total sleazeball. That's part of the reason why you're suspicious of him, is because he's played by, what's his name, Dougray Scott. I mainly know him as the villain from Death Race 3, and he was a lot of fun in that movie, but he was an over-the-top bad guy, and I could never get that out of my head as I was watching him in this movie. But he still nailed it. I thought he did a good job at making him unpredictable, so you weren't entirely sure where they were going to go with him. And Liam Neeson, he's always going to be good, even when he's playing a rather stale role. He can keep a movie from totally submerging just because he's Liam freaking Neeson. And I thought was there Famke Janssen? I never learned how to pronounce her name, but she plays his ex-wife. I think she finally managed to create a character in this movie, whereas in the previous films she wasn't very likable because she was either too bitchy in the first movie or too nice in the second one. But above everything, she just felt like a walking, talking plot device. But in Taken 3, she has finally become a character, and I think the actress deserves a lot of credit for making that happen. And yeah, I mean, Taken 3 sucks just because there's really no reason to watch it. It's the same shit that we've seen before, and the action scenes aren't enough to, carry it. Whereas even like The Expendables 3, which made me a lot angrier, has moments of awesomeness and has enough good material to make it almost worth well, I'd even say to make it worth watching if you liked the first two films. Taken 3 is just going through the motions, and you'll be underwhelmed no matter what you feel about the movie. You might not think it's as bad as I'm making it out to be, but at the same time, I'd be really surprised if you remembered anything that happened in this film after a week. So if you choose to watch it, I'd try to wait till it comes out on Netflix or TV. I would not spend any real money on it. Let the movie come to you, don't go to it. But I did not do a written review, even though I did written reviews of the first two films. I've done written reviews of The Woman in Black 2 and Ragnarok, which is a Norwegian horror or a Norwegian monster movie. So read those. My next project will be my worst of 2014 list, so please check that out. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. And I hope you enjoyed this video, which has gone on a bit too long. And I shall see you guys later.